Welcome to Higher Self Mastery, the podcast for women ready to leave behind who they were told to be and remember who they truly are. I'm your host, Dharmi Schumacher. This is your space to come home to yourself, to honor the inner pull for more truth and more depth, and more meaning as you enter a new chapter of your life. Together, we're reframing midlife crisis into the midlife magic that it actually is, because this is your rebirth. Through soulful conversations and spiritual tools, you'll reconnect to your truth and reclaim your voice and live the life that your soul came here for. So let's begin. Hello and welcome back to another episode of Higher Self Mastery. I'm your host, Dharmi Schumacher. Thank you so much for joining me. This is an episode about what it looks like when healing meets your family. It's about staying calm and regulated in your nervous system when you're thrust back into those old childhood dynamics. It's about love and guilt and gratitude and all of the complexities of the different emotions that arise when we are in our closest relationships. It's about reparenting ourselves in the wild, outside of the journal and the quiet meditations. I'm so excited to be sharing with you this episode because it's a real life blog of an adventure and a journey that I'm about to embark on. In some ways, I have begun it already. But the real work and the real adventure is just about to happen. So back in December of last year, I began some inner child work. I've done inner child work before, but this was a very specific challenge, a set series of exercises to go through. And I really wanted to do it in the deep of winter. However, the way that the situation, my schedule, and the way that events unfolded, it just meant that I barely scratched the surface with this challenge. But it's still mine and it's still there for me to complete. And I'm still absolutely determined to do the work because I can see the value in doing the work. I just didn't manage to fit it in when I thought I would fit it in. But I can now see that actually the universe probably had this in mind all the time and knew what was to come long before I knew what was going to happen now in January. And so I feel like the work was intentionally postponed for my benefit, so I can really, truly maximize on the growth that will take place once I start doing this work. So in December of last year, what also happened, as I was also trying to navigate through this inner child workshop challenge, my parents decided that they wanted to go to India this year. And we'd spoken previously about me accompanying them on this particular trip, but it was just hearsay. We didn't really lock anything in. And I didn't have any desire to go to India, especially back to Gujarat, which is where my ancestral heritage is from. And also, this wasn't going to be a holiday necessarily because it's they're going on official business and they're just there to really sort out a lot of paperwork and things like that. And but at the end of Christmas, I think it was on Boxing Day, I was there, I was hanging out with them. I'd had a couple of really lovely days spending time with my parents. And I found myself offering to join them. And immediately I saw like my dad's face just lit up. Like, that would be great. And I physically saw my mom's shoulders just drop and with relief, and I could just see the weight lifting off both of their shoulders, like, oh my gosh, that would be amazing. Yes, please, that would be great. And it was wonderful to be able to do that for them. And that place where that yes came from was from my heart. It was just a knowing. It wasn't from a place of obligation. It wasn't from a place of being pushed or bullied or forced into it or agreeing to something that didn't align for me. It was something that I'm really, really grateful that I can do. I'm in the position to do. I run my own business. I can manage my own schedule. Yes, it means a lot of organizing to make it happen. It doesn't mean it's easy, but it is possible. And especially now that my daughter is homeschooled, what better chance than now to, go abroad for as long as we need to go abroad, and I can assist my parents with the work that they need to do, and she can have an educational trip abroad as well at the same time. And so I said, I'll come along and I'll do this. And initially I was like, oh, that's really good. This is the right decision. Like, just to see that reaction in my parents was worth it. And I knew that was the right decision. And I knew anyway in myself it was the right decision. However, about 24 hours, 48 hours later, after saying that I would join them, I was singing a very different tune at home in my own head to myself. I was like, holy cow, what have I signed up for? How am I going to do this? I love my parents and I love that I can offer my support and my help and be able to join them on this trip. And also, I want to create these memories with them while I can. And I feel honored to do this. But how on earth am I going to spend 3 whole weeks with them 24/7 and not lose myself? Right? And then I started to question, like, have I made a mistake? What have I done? How am I going to survive? Will they survive me? Like, are we just going to end up screaming at each other at the end of these 3 weeks? And all sorts of things went through my head. And what was really happening here was that my adult self had made the decision that it was the right thing to do to go and accompany them on this trip. And it was my inner child that was emotionally reacting. And I know when I say that, so many of you will be like, oh my gosh, yes, I so resonate. I've so been there too, Dharmi, because that is the nature of the complexities of our relationship with our parents. If you weren't raised by your parents, it may be that you have these inner child dynamics with the people that were your main caregivers, but it could also still be your parents as well, even if they were absent, because we're bound to them. We're bound to them genetically, we're bound to them energetically, and nothing can change that and nothing can break that. And that is a karmic contract that our souls have made long before we even come into this human form. And we pick our parents for a reason, to help us to grow in certain ways that we've decided that these are the challenges and these are the lessons that I want to learn in this experience of my human journey this time round. And that's why these relationships with our parents are so complicated, and that's just from before we've even taken human form, right? And then there's all the messy stuff that happens right here in the lived experience in itself. And all these things were going through my head. The logic started to come up. It was like, I haven't spent this much time with my parents since I don't know when. And here on this trip, I am going to be bound to them for the majority of the time, not only in the traveling, but we're all living in the same place. But then during the day, we've gone very intentionally to go out and sort out some business. And so I'm there to accompany my parents to help them navigate this as they navigate the bureaucracy and all the different agents and, all the other different officials there. So I'll be traveling with them and translating and, mediating and all of those things all day long with them. It's only when I go to bed at night and fall asleep is when I'm going to actually have any kind of distance. I'm sure there may be little pockets here and there that I might be able to steal, but for the most part, we are together for this entire duration. And that's intense. That's intense for me to do with anyone, even with my daughter or even with my husband, because I'm very much a person who really, really needs my space, right? So all these things were coming up like, how are you going to do this? How are you going to survive this, Dharmi? Like, have I made a mistake? Is this going to spoil the relationship that I have with my parents as it is right now? And then also what started coming up for me, other logical reasons. And if you're not watching on YouTube, I say logical in quotation marks because it's just a mask and a disguise for your fear. So the other things that started coming up for me was like, it's the middle of winter and I'm really enjoying wintering. I'm still moving nice and slowly. I'm still enjoying the quiet pace. I'm still enjoying just seeding things. I'm not ready to go out in the world full energy. And this is going to be such a shock to anyone's nervous system. I'm going to arrive in the middle of summer and it's going to be all socializing, everything's very external interactions, meetings, from one place to the next, this person's house to that person's house, this event to that event, social events, business events. And it's this big outward energy. All my energy is going to be going out of me rather than me still being in this beautiful hibernation period and cocooning myself and recuperating. And so that was like, whoa, I don't want to do that. How am I going to cope when I'm there, being lifted from winter and then thrust into summer? Like, how does that even work for your nervous system? Like, that's just going to be awful. That's going to cause so much havoc. And then I realized what was happening. I'm not saying those things are not true, but life doesn't always play out the way we plan it on paper, right? Things are thrown at you from different directions and it doesn't always go according to your plans. So I'm not saying that those thoughts are not valid, but what I did start to notice was, hang on a second, Dharmi. And the only reason I was able to catch it for what it is because I've been doing this work for as long as I've been doing it. And this is the very thing that I teach my clients to look out for and teach them to identify and become more aware of. One of the disguises that fear wears is logic and reason. But how do I know that those thoughts, those logical reasons that came to mind were driven by fear or were actually the right decision for me and I should have pulled out? The way that I am able to discern which one is fear and which one is my higher self, the decision that I made, and I said, I'll come with you to India, that decision came from love. That decision was really calm. It was really grounded. It was just a knowing within me that this is the right thing to do and this is the thing that is most aligned for me. This is what my higher self wants to do right now. Whereas all of the other stuff about what am I going to do? Am I going to manage? How am I going to spend all this time with them? You can hear it in my voice already. And that is very much the type of energy that was behind it. It was frantic. It was frantic. It was jumping around. It was trying to convince me. And your higher self, it will never try to explain why it's the best decision to make. It will just be this, here, this is what you need to do. And it's just information and it's quiet and it lands softly. And that's it. No fluff around it. And whereas the fear is just that. It's fear. It's my mind saying, this sounds uncomfortable, this sounds unfamiliar, and there's too many uncertainties about this decision that you've made, and that's scary. So we don't want to do that. We want to stay here where we are comfortable in our little bubble and we know how things work. So no, we're going to come up with lots and lots of reasons and make them very, very logical. So you're convinced, and we're going to argue for our point like a good lawyer why you should not be going. And that's exactly what the fear did. It came up with all these really solid reasons why I should be going. And it was only afterwards I was able to go, oh, gosh, that was a lot of noise. And I had to come back and go, no, this is the right decision. And I had to come back and make peace with that. And it was only once I made peace with that that I was able to see that, okay, what is this really about? Because I'm following the instincts, I'm following the guidance and the intuition, but I'm not steering this ship, not with my small self, not with my ego self, like my higher self is steering this, right? So this has been put on my path for a particular reason, and it's only ever put on your path for growth. So what is this about? And I started to get curious. And this is where I started to now get really quite excited. And this is what I want to share with you. And I'm going to invite you to come on this journey with me. If not, as I navigated, when I come back, we'll come back and report what exactly happened as soon as I'm able to make sense of it. But I was able to sort of start getting curious and say, okay, so hang on a second, all that inner child work that you wanted to do in December, that you just for whatever reason, different reasons, just couldn't really get into it. You started it, but you've barely scratched the surface. This is something that you could potentially do when you go to India. Great, because it just requires some headphones, maybe half an hour here or an hour there where you can just sit down quietly, maybe in the evenings or early in the mornings. When you're away where you don't have the day-to-day responsibilities like I do here, that would be a great opportunity to finish that work. And then it got me thinking a little bit more. Hold on. The topic of that challenge is inner child work. Now, all of the inner child work that I do, I grew up in a very typical household, nothing extraordinary, and yet there is still so much wounding and that needs to be healed. So very quickly, like for those of you who don't know me, both my parents, I was raised by both my parents. They are still together. I have an older sibling who is 6 years my senior. And it was, for the most part, a very fortunate upbringing. Not fortunate in the sense that we were abundant with material things or abundant in finances, but fortunate in that I had a family unit. There was still a lot of love that I received in my family. I had strong community. I had opportunities to go to school. I had opportunities to grow and do things as I became a little bit older. Like I didn't have a lot. We didn't have a lot, but I also didn't have any major grievances either, right? So it was a very, for lack of a better word, neutral upbringing, right? There was nothing extraordinary that happened in my childhood, like that was extraordinarily negative or extraordinarily positive either necessarily. Just somewhere in the middle. And yet, because I have already done so much inner child work over the years, I'm very aware that we still pick up so much. We still carry loads of belief systems, loads of narratives, loads of stories that I either we've witnessed within our parents or were actually fed to us by our parents for our benefit because they thought that it was actually going to help us. Whatever it is, there's all these things of ways that our inner child just didn't have their needs met in the way that are actually aligned for who we are, because our parents themselves have got their own stories and their own blocks and are often repeating what they were raised with too, unless they're doing this work actively themselves as well, right? And so there's a lot still there, and everyone has this. And if you've never done any inner child work, I highly recommend it. Get in touch with me. I'm more than happy to point you in the right direction with how to get started with these things. There's so many different ways. But when I started to think about, okay, so I'm going to finish this work when I'm there in India and finish this inner child work. Oh, how interesting. I'm going to be doing it when I'm in this pressurized container with my parents, where I'm going to be in this situation of 3 weeks with them, repeating and revisiting some old identities. So even though I'm a grown woman, when I'm in front of my parents, where those places that my inner child still has some wounding and still has some healing to do, even though the 46-year-old woman is physically the person that is standing in front of the parent, internally, emotionally, psychologically, subconsciously, the person that is in front of them is perhaps the 5-year-old me, or perhaps the 9-year-old me, the part of me that didn't have my needs met or were wounded or were hurt. And that's where those triggers come from. And it's going to be really interesting to take what I'm learning in those meditations, in those journal prompts, in those hypnosis, and whatever it is that I end up doing, all that reflective work in the workshop itself, and then actually be able to take it into the real world while I'm in this capsule with them. And I'm really quite excited about this. Of course, it's going to be challenging. I have no doubt about that. But that's what I signed up for. Growth is one of my highest values, if not the highest value, maybe alongside freedom and growth, like they're both right up there. And when you demonstrate to the universe that you're open and willing to do the work, and you do the work, it only then gives you more, because that is what our soul signed up for before coming here, to grow and to learn, to awaken. And I had some really big lessons presented to me last year, and I feel incredibly proud that I feel I navigated them in a pretty good way. Not perfectly, but then, what is perfect as well, right? And I haven't finished navigating those. And the big one of the big ones from last year in 2025, if you listen to some of the most recent episodes I shared with you, was the parenting one for me. And I, at the time and at the end of 2025, I would have said, whoa, I don't think anything can get bigger than that, because that's huge. Learning to reparent, learning to completely shift the dynamics in the relationship between me and my daughter. What could be bigger than that? Well, I kind of asked for it in many ways. Well, and the universe went, well, this could be, is that what you're asking for, Dharmi? Because I think maybe you're ready for it. And it's a bit scary. I'm not going to lie. I want to do the work. I'm ready to do the work, but I also know it may well be a really, really bumpy ride. But then at the same time, maybe it won't be as hairy and scary as I think it's going to be. I don't know. I'll just have to see what happens and take each moment as it comes and each day as it comes. It could be that the opportunity may arise so that I can actually have some of these conversations with my parents if they're open to it and if they're in the right space. So as I'm realizing things about my childhood, places that I didn't feel I was met or need healing, maybe I'll be in this space away from the day-to-day life here and being on holiday, so to speak, or just away together. I might have more opportunities to have these conversations with them and have the space to do that, which I don't normally get to do so easily here. Maybe that's the gift in itself that's being presented to me. I don't know. I can't do the work for them. If they're not open to it, they're not open to it. If the time's not right, then that's fine. My work still continues. But that's really exciting that could be a possibility. And I think if I can do that, then the healing will be accelerated as I'm doing this work. The healing's going to be accelerated nonetheless, as long as I am approaching this challenge with open arms, because I'm doing the inner work for myself, and then I'm living and doing the healing in real time as well, as I go on this trip with them. And there is so many different things to navigate here, because you don't want to abandon your inner child again, and you want to have those boundaries, and you want to be able to say no or speak up for yourself, or say no, that's not okay for you to say that to me now, or treat me in that way, or you need to respect me differently. Because of course, remember, they still see you as a child as well in many ways, right? They've got their own things that they're working through. On the one hand, I'm an adult, because now the dynamics have, and they shifted many years ago, and so many of you will be able to relate to this as well. At some point in our adult life, we begin to notice where our parents start to become more dependent on us and not the other way. So on the one hand, I'm now the person that is there to help support them, whether that's with the travel, whether that's there on the ground in India when we're working out all this official business, but also, the peacekeeper as well, right? And also like that person who has to just really keep calm all the time. And so everybody else can have their emotions too. And it's a lot. It can be a lot. But then at the same time, they also will see me as a child as well. And yet here I am, and I'm going to be put in a position where I need to protect my inner child, speak up for my inner child, yet at the same time as well, be available to them and for them so I can support them, which is the whole reason for going on this trip in the first place. But without taking away their independence, without also just falling into that role of complete dependency as well. And there's just this really interesting balance that's going to have to be struck so that it works for everyone. And on top of that, just most recently, what came up for me as well is that whenever I've previously traveled to India, and I've been many times, I haven't been in a long time, but I've been many times before, this is going to be really quite unique because I've never been with my parents. I went with my mom when I was about 6 months old, and that was it. And so this is the first time I'm going with both my mom and my dad. And not only that, we're going back to our ancestral land, to Gujarat. So this is where all of our heritage comes from both my parents' sides. So where all the family is, where all the history is. And previously, I've been to India, and I've just traveled from north to south, south to north, and I've been to, done my yoga teacher training in Madurai in the south, and I've been to Goa, and I've been up to the Himalayas and done all that fun stuff with a backpack. Or with my mates and things like that. And it's been very, very different. It's that those trips have actually been holidays and on my own terms. And this is very much a family-based trip. And with that, I feel like there could be maybe some ancestral healing that may take place as well. In the last 12 months or so, I've been working with the medicine women cards, the oracle cards, which I just adore and love. And some of the work that's come up for me in some of those ceremonies and rituals when I've sat is reconnecting to my matriarchal lineage. And at one point, it took me all the way back, and I saw the most fierce, courageous, wild woman. And she had strands of beautiful, long gray hair, and she was this strong matriarch figure and identity. And I felt very, very close that she is somebody where my ancestral lineage began from my mother's side. And she was definitely an Indian woman all the way back there as well. And so I feel like this trip may open up something on that level as well for me. But even though I say all this, even though I'm sharing all this and saying, I think this is going to be a big trip about how as I heal the inner child wounds and also live the inner child triggers while I'm there with my parents, I'm also very aware of how mischievous the universe can be. And what I mean by that is usually the things that I think are going to happen, or the growth that I think is awaiting me, or the next challenge that may show up for me, is not what actually happens. And it's something completely unexpected and surprising. So even though I feel like this is what may happen, and I've thought about it clearly, very deeply, which is why I'm sharing it here with you, it may well end up being something completely different. And I'll be just as ready and open for that as well, because I trust fully that whatever comes up for me is going to be for my highest good and for the highest good of everybody around me as well. But what I will endeavor to do is, as I go on this trip, is to pause, to take a breath so that I can respond before I react when those triggers happen. And when they do happen, not if, when they do, because they absolutely will, is ask myself, what age child is responding or reacting right now? Where is that coming from? What wound is that associated to? And what is it I can do to make her feel better, supported, seen, heard, loved, whatever it is she needs, so then we can put that wound away, heal it, close it, and release it. And also at the same time, and allow my parents to be human as well, so not to take anything away from them as we all navigate this experience. So yeah, it's going to be really interesting, and I just thought it's really been on my mind for obvious reasons intensely. And I actually leave this week on Saturday, so this episode comes out on Wednesday if you're listening as and when it's released, and I'll be off in India on the Saturday following. So another thought came to my mind is, shall I blog on this? Not just about the inner child work, but shall I blog on this trip to India? Whether that's about the dynamics as I heal this inner child work, or if it's about the ancestral connection when I go back to my homeland, to my motherland, or maybe it is about another side of growth that comes up for me, something that I can't see right now. Maybe it's because at the same time it's a fulfilling one of my highest values in another way as well, which is adventure and travel. So maybe it could end up being more about that. I don't know. But if that sounds like something you may want to follow along and come on that journey with me, just drop me an email, or if you're watching on YouTube, drop the word blog in the comments below to show me who's interested in following along. I can't promise anything because I want to be in integrity to my energy, how I feel, my priorities while I'm there with my parents and my family. And I don't want to commit to anything that then becomes and feels forced. But if it feels spacious, it could be fun. So yeah, let me know how you feel about that. So I don't know exactly what this trip's going to bring, and I can't control the lesson, but I can choose the way that I meet it. And I'm going to endeavor to meet it from my higher self and with grace and with love and with forgiveness and with kindness as much as I can. That's the intention now. Maybe if I'm blogging, I might be screaming down that camera like, this is awful. Who knows, right? Thank you so much for listening. One way or another, whether I blog about it or not, I will let you know what happened, because undoubtedly it will be something worth sharing, and there'll be some lessons in this trip. And I'll come back and I'll share them with you. Until next week, take care. Bye-bye. Thank you for joining me on this episode of Higher Self Mastery. If something landed, moved you, or sparked a shift, I'd love to hear from you. Be sure to follow, subscribe, and share this episode with a woman in your life that is also ready to rise. And if you found value in today's conversation, please take a moment to rate and review this podcast, especially in these early days. It really helps others to find this work too. If you're craving deeper support and sisterhood, join my mailing list using the link below, where you'll be the first to receive free meditations, learn about up-and-coming retreats, and other ways that we can work together. Until next time, honor your truth and trust in the timing of your becoming.